Welcome to Hansraj e-Samvaad Center, a center for digital creation and distribution of knowledge by the use of internet with the active collaboration of all the teachers, the faculty, the learned staff at Hansraj College. We are here to deliver the best lectures to you. My name is Piyush Chaudhary and I am teaching as an assistant professor at the Department of English at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. The topic that we will be discussing today is the value addition course, the VAC paper, which is a unique paper which is offered in all the colleges of University of Delhi. So this video will not only be beneficial for the students of Hansraj, but can be accessed, can be viewed and can be taken benefit from all the students from the various colleges of University of Delhi studying this particular VAC, culture and communication, can watch this lecture and prepare for their incoming exams. Now the VAC paper, as we know, is a value addition course. The VAC stands for Value Addition Courses, which is a set of several courses which are offered in all the colleges of the University of Delhi as part of the NEP 2020 program. The VAC that I will be teaching, and I am teaching this paper at Hansraj College currently. I've been teaching this paper for over a year. And the VAC that I'll be discussing today is Culture and Communication. It's a paper which is offered mostly by the Department of English across the various colleges. And I will be going on a detailed discussion on the syllabus of the VAC, that is Culture and Communication. Then I will be also discussing the various readings. So in this paper, there are some 7 or 8 readings, and I'll be discussing all these readings and I'll be taking on to the journey of VAC Culture and Communication. So welcome back, students and all the viewers. So from here, we will be discussing the syllabus of this VAC, Culture and Communication. So I'll be discussing the syllabus, I'll be discussing the rationale behind this paper, and we'll be discussing the course objectives and also the various readings. So what I've done is I've made 5 or 6 slides to first give you a brief overview of this particular VAC, and then we'll be discussing this VAC, and then one by one in the subsequent lectures, I'll be discussing the various texts, the various points, the various readings that are there in our syllabus. Subsequently, I'll be looking at that as well. So look at the very first learning objective that we have right now. So the first learning objective is to focus on traditional values. See, the point is that this particular VAC, that is Culture and Communication, the various readings that are given to us. For example, we are given the reading of Bankim Chandra's Vande Mataram. Then we'll also be reading Sudha Murthy's life story, her autobiographical piece. Then we will also be reading Sri Aurobindo's introduction to the Gita. We will also be reading Swami Vivekananda's speech that he delivered, which was well received and which definitely, it was one of the most famous speeches by a Hindu, by a Sanatani in a foreign land, which was very well received by the American audience as well. So basically, the various points, that the various readings that we have in our syllabus, the various short stories, the various poems, we'll also be reading some short stories, we'll be reading some poems, then we'll also be looking at some essays, some commentaries on several other texts. We'll also be discussing Chanakya Niti by Kautilya. So basically the idea is, as you can see on the screen, to focus on traditional values disseminated from the Indian cultural heritage. So that is going to be our main aim in reading this particular VAC, that is Culture and Communication, to also understand how the past of our country, how the glorious past of our country can be reinterpreted and can be brought back to the fold, can be brought back to the focus of the contemporary readers. So that is the purpose of University of Delhi, because we have started this course VAC, that is the Value Addition course, to add values to the students. And this particular VAC, Culture and Communication, promises to deliver certain values as well as to deliver the ancient heritage, the culture of India, while also maintaining our modernity at the same very time. Right. So then we will also be developing, and through these various essays, through these various poems, through these various short stories, we will be celebrating, as you can see, the third point, our diversity, our pluralistic culture. So we'll be taking up ideas from various aspects of our culture and we'll be discussing them in a detailed manner later on. So basically the core idea, the learning objective is to inculcate life skills to inculcate value skills amongst all of us. Now, these are the course outcomes. So through these readings that we have, students will be able to appreciate the relevance of ancient Indian wisdom. As I mentioned, the traditional Indian knowledge, the Indian knowledge systems, or more popularly known as IKS right now, it's very much in trend, and for all the right reasons, because India needs to reclaim its glorious past, to reclaim its heritage. And for that, we have to hark back to our ancient cultural and knowledge systems, to our ancient Indian philosophical thoughts. So basically, after the studying of this VAC, the students will be able to appreciate the ancient Indian wisdom and to also inculcate that in their own lives, isn't it? Then we'll be discussing several of the various traditional short stories, so to understand how the past can be used in the present to inculcate values of morality and to also appreciate the deep culture of India, the deep philosophical culture of India, that is for all of us to understand and to live by. Right? So students will be encouraged to involve themselves in teamwork and group activities. So as part of this VAC in all of your respective colleges, your teachers will be giving you certain group work, certain group activities, so that you know what culture actually means and how to communicate one's own culture. Then students will be able to develop communication skills. So this is also one of the course outcomes. Then extension activities will be also given to the students, as I've mentioned, in your own respective colleges, right? So let us now discuss the brief syllabus, right? So this is the syllabus in front of you in Unit 1. The Unit 1 is titled Ethical Values from Indian Cultural Heritage. So we will delve into the idea of Vasudev Kutumbakam, how the world itself is a big large family, and also how Vasudev Kutumbakam is one of India's most ancient methods of inculcating globalization, as we have already studied till now, as students would have studied in their school till now, is more or less considered as a Western phenomena. But no, that is not how it is. It has been a Bhartiya phenomena which has been deeply embedded in our culture since millennia. So we will also understand the concept of united we stand, divided we fall, basically the concept of unity in diversity. And also we'll be also discussing briefly on Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, and how this idea of Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat can be inculcated in our academic lives, in our professional lives, in our social lives, in our cultural lives, to bring in a more glorious idea about India and about Bharatiya culture. Then Unit 2 will be on developing life skills. So through these various readings, we will be learning several life skills such as empathy, such as adaptability. So for example, when we read Sudha Murthy's autobiographical short story on how when she was a young woman in her early teens, so when she joined college, and how she was discriminated because she used to study in an all boys college, in an engineering college, way back in 1960s and early 1970s. Through this story, we will learn the idea of adaptability. We learn the idea of empathy. So basically, the idea is that the various short stories, the various poems, the various essays, the various readings that are given to us, through all of this, we will learn several life skills such as empathy, such as adaptability, such as conserving our natural resources and sharing our knowledge resources. Then through these very activities and through the various CA and the IA projects, the CA project, the continuous assessment and the internal assessment projects, we will also be learning the art of empathetic listening, considerate speaking, analytical writing, and analytical reading and informed writing. Right. So these are the various essential readings that we'll be discussing. The very first reading that we'll be discussing is Sri Aurobindo's Introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. So as we know, the Bhagavad Gita is the ancient literary text. It's not just a Hindu text, it's a basic Bharatiya text, because it not just talks about one religion, it talks about humanity as a whole. It talks about and at the same time, it also talks about the Indian philosophical thought. So the Bhagavad Gita is definitely a Hindu text, a Hindu religious text, but at the same time, it's a very universal, it's an absolutely universal text which can be implemented and which can be taken advantage of, from which humans can learn regardless of their religion, regardless of their creed, regardless of their nationality. So the Bhagavad Gita is such a storehouse of knowledge that several people have given their introductions, they have given their, their commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. So the very first topic of our syllabus will be Sri Aurobindo's contribution and Sri Aurobindo's views on Bhagavad Gita, as you can see on the screen. Then you have SP Dhanvel's English and soft skills. So basically how we can use soft skills to improve our communication. So that is also a part of your readings. Then you have A&D Husker. A&D Husker's Chanakya Niti Shastra. As we all know, Chanakya Niti was written by Kautilya. So we will be reading A&D Husker's introduction, and then we will be reading certain poems or certain verses, I would say. We will be reading certain verses by Chanakya. Then next we have is Keshav Malik, a dehumanized environment. So basically it's a short essay which talks about how our environment today is completely dehumanized and how humans are living in a in an almost apocalyptic world, but then we are not realizing the fact that our natural resources are getting depleted very soon and we are not really acting on it. So it's a satiric essay that Keshav Malik writes, talking about how our environment is getting degraded day by day. Then you have the famous and the very beautiful short story. It's an autobiographical piece by Sudha Murthy, the famous philanthropist and the CEO, one of the co-founders of the famous IT firm Infosys, How to Beat the Boys. So what Sudha Murthy does is that Sudha Murthy describes her story, how she was able to defeat the boys in a boys game, because Sudha Murthy was an engineer. In the 1960s and 70s, she started her career, she started her student life as an engineer. And at that point of time, for a woman to enter into an engineering college was almost inconceivable, because it was not considered proper for women to go into professional areas other than maybe, other than medical sciences or perhaps teaching, because these two professions are considered gentle, they are considered more feminine, right? So how Sudha Murthy broke the stereotype, how Sudha Murthy ushered in a new culture wherein girls were able to get education in almost all fields possible. So Sudha Murthy was almost an alien when she went to her college, because it was an all boys college. They didn't even have a female washroom for her, because it was totally inconceivable that a woman would be there, that a woman would be studying the discipline of engineering. So how Sudha Murthy defeated the stereotypes, this is what we are going to study. The next is A.K. Ramanujan's A Flowering Tree, which is a folk tale which talks about women's idea of flowering, of menstruation, and how the idea of menstruation is very similar to the idea of flowering. And so it's basically a folk tale, very beautifully constructed folk tale, which talks about several aspects related to feminism. And A.K. Ramanujan has also given his detailed commentary on A Flowering Tree. A Flowering Tree is basically a Kannada folk tale. So we'll be reading that. Next is Vande Mataram, the song by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, which was originally first published in his famous novel Anandamath. So we'll be also reading Vande Mataram. We'll be starting this VAC, this session with Vande Mataram very soon. I'll be teaching that. And the last is Swami Vivekanand, as I've already mentioned a while ago in this lecture, that it'll be, how he was welcomed at the, at the conference when he talked about, for the very first time, way back almost 150, 200 years ago, his welcome address at the, historical congress. Right. So we'll be reading how Swami Vivekanand also talks about his concept of Bhartiyata, which is one of the first, and it's one of the first ways in which globalization can be said to be as one of the defining features of Bhartiya culture, right? So the first topic that we'll be discussing today is Vande Mataram, the song by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. So I'll be reading Sri Aurobindo's translation of the song, and stanza by stanza I will be discussing the poem with you, and I'll also be giving my detailed commentary on that. So let us start reading the poem from here onwards. So basically, firstly, this song is about the culture of India. The song Vande Mataram represents how the culture of a nation is represented. So, the poem talks about the space and the position of a nation. Because right now we are not talking about India as a nation, because when the song Vande Mataram was written, the name India did not really officially hold its records in the official records. I mean, the name India was still not officially recorded, because we were still a country under the under the hegemonic, under the influence, of the British, we were still a slave country. We were not free. The Britishers ruled us at that point of time. Therefore, throughout this lecture, I will be talking about the unnamed country, that is Bharat Mata, right? So the song, as I mentioned, is about the culture of the nation. It's about the culture of the nation and how the culture is imagined in the popular imagination during the colonial rule. The poem also shows, I would say, it also shows the culture of national identity in 19th century Bengal and in our country. So here I'll be reading the very first stanza of the poem. Mother, I bow to thee, rich with thy hurrying streams, bright with thy orchard gleams, cool with thy winds of delight, dark fields waving, mother of might, mother free. So you see how Mother India is referred to. So if you look at the poem closely, notice that Mother India is referred to in terms of nature, isn't it? I can read here in terms of streams, in terms of orchards, in terms of winds, in terms of dark fields. So streams, orchards, winds and fields, what are these? These are just representations of culture, right? Representations of nature, isn't it? So Mother India, the motherland, the mother country, the motherland is referred to in terms of nature. Why is it being done so? This represents a close relation between nature and our country. As we all know, this concept also brings in the concept of ecology and how it is closely related to the Indian cultural thought. This also brings in the concept of the Mother India rather than the Father India, because Mother India represents richness, fertility and nature. The way Bankim Chandra has described the nation, he has described the nation in feminine terms, in natural terms. So this also shows a close relation between femininity and between our culture. So the readers, I will stop here for a moment and I'll discuss in more detail on the concept of fatherland versus a motherland. The readers would be interested to know that why do we call India, why do we call it as a Bharat Mata? Why not a Pita? What is the reason that India is being referred to in terms of Mother India and not Father India? The idea is that the Western nations, with their intent towards capitalism, towards materialistic economy, the idea is that the West considers their country as a father figure, as fatherland. But the East, particularly countries such as India, countries such as, there are several other nations as well in the eastern part of the globe, where a country is referred to in terms of the feminine self, right? So India is being referred to as Bharat Mata. And the reason for that is that in India, there is a close affinity, I would say, there is a close affinity between nature and between femininity. So nature is a feminine figure. Nature is a feminine entity, because just like women, just like mothers, just like sisters, just like mothers basically, nature also provides us with food, with oxygen, with air, with water to support ourselves. So the idea is that Mother India is referred to as a mother because the nation also gives us a lot. The nation also, in a way, the nation gives us the necessary things to live, right? And that is why in the very first stanza, Bankim says, Mother, I bow to thee. That's because the country that Bankim Chandra lives in, the country, our country is a feminine entity. And that is why, the idea of a Bharat Mata is extremely and very closely related to the ancient texts, to the ancient philosophy, to the Indian philosophical and Indian knowledge thoughts, to the Indian philosophical thoughts and to the Indian knowledge systems, I would say, right? So we have to understand that when we talk about the Indian knowledge systems, when we talk about Vande Mataram as a song, when we talk about our country, so our country is imagined in terms of a feminine entity. Because just like a mother, our country also gives us several things to survive and to sustain ourselves, right? So this is the reason why Bankim Chandra has represented a very close relation between nature and the country. So you see how in the very first stanza, Mother India is referred to in terms of nature. In the very first stanza, it says about streams, about orchards, it talks about winds, it talks about fields. So in the very first stanza, it is quite clear that the imagery of nature is very dominant. Alright, and this, as I mentioned, also brings in the concept of Mother India rather than Father India, with Mother India representing richness, fertility and nature. Right? So India or Bharat Mata is referred to as a feminine entity because of the close relation of nature with our country, because India also has a rich flora. India has a rich fauna. It's a land which has traditionally been blessed with huge amounts of green cover, isn't it? So nature and also some of the most prominent, some of the most famous ecological developments and ecological fights to save the environment have begun from India. The very first instance that comes to our mind is the Chipko Andolan, right? Which was started in the hilly areas of Uttarakhand. The Chipko Andolan, as we know, was started because the villagers, the local inhabitants, the tribal people, they wanted to secure their nation. They wanted to secure their state, and more importantly, they wanted to save the heritage, the nature, the green cover, because it is ultimately the trees and the environment which gives us the power to sustain ourselves as a human race, isn't it? Right? So the readers will notice that when you talk about India, the Indian philosophical thought is deeply embedded. I would say it is very deeply embedded within the feminine space and within the cultural space that is, and there is a close relation between ecology and the Indian cultural thought. So now when we come back to the poem, so the very first stanza shows us the basic imageries in the very first stanza are of nature. It's of fertility. It's of richness. The poet is talking about orchards. The poet is talking about streams, about rivers. The poet is talking about winds. It's talking about the dark fields. Ultimately, the poet bows down in front of his mother country, in front of his Bharat Mata, in the very first stanza itself. Let us now go to the second part, the second stanza. And I'm going to read it, and then I'll also be discussing some of the important points in the second stanza. So the second stanza begins as, "Glory of moonlight dreams over thy beaches and lordly streams. Clad in thy blossoming trees, mother, giver of ease. Laughing low and sweet, mother, I kiss thy feet. Speaker sweet and low, mother, to thee I bow." Right? So once again, the imagery, the dominant imagery is of nature. In the second stanza itself, it's talking about moonlight. It's talking about the lordly streams. It's talking about the blossoming trees. So the poet Bankim here represents the landscape of his mother country through nature and natural descriptions, isn't it? Now, let us go forward to the third stanza, which talks about, interestingly, about the fighting spirit, right? So here I'll read the third stanza. "Who hath said thou art weak in thy lands, when the swords flash out in 70 million hands, and 70 million voices roar thy dreadful name from shore to shore?" So what is the poet trying to say here? What is Bankim trying to express here? So the third stanza talks about the warriors who will fight the battle for independence against the colonizers, against the Britishers, and against the oppressors. So Bankim says that he says that the motherland should not worry, and the motherland is not weak, because the motherland has 70 million sons in her service who will fight in the honor of Mother India, who will fight in the honor of the mother country. So the poet says that there are 70 million sons who will come out having swords in their hands to slay the enemy who has tried to oppress them. Right? So 70 million sons will fight for mother country, and therefore she has nothing to worry. That is why the poet says, when the swords flash out in 70 million hands and 70 million voices roar thy dreadful name from shore to shore. Moving forward, With many strengths who art mighty and stored, to thee I call mother and lord. So the poet is referring to her mother country as mother and lord. Thou who savest, arise and save. To her I cry, whoever her foemen drave, back from plain and sea, and shook herself free. The next stanza. Thou art wisdom, thou art law. Very important stanza. Look at the way in which Bankim Chandra has described mother country, the motherland, his own country. Thou art wisdom, thou art law, thou our heart, our soul, our breath. Thou the love divine, the awe in our hearts that conquers death. So the poet calls Mother India as the epitome of wisdom, of art, of law, of the soul, and of love. So look at the deep-seated love that Bankim has for his mother country. Look at the deep-seated love and respect that Bankim has for his mother country, because that is why he says that, "Oh my mother country," he's referring to his Mata, to his Bharat Mata, "you are wisdom, you are law, you are heart, you are soul, and you are the breath, and you are the love." So the poet refers to the Mother India as the epitome of wisdom, law, heart, soul, and love. So it is not just a nation that Bankim is talking about, but there is this deep-seated love for the motherland that he has, and that is how it is being expressed through this particular poem. So basically, the reason why this poem has been kept in this VAC, Culture and Communication, is because, as we know, the VACs are meant to give us a value addition, to give us to tell us basically about our old heritage, about the ancient heritage, about the rich heritage of our country. So this song Vande Mataram basically shows us the deep-seated love and the respect that we have for our country, and how it has been transmuted and how it has been communicated through the cultural understanding, to the understanding of the people through a cultural reproduction of this particular poem. So this poem, when we recite Vande Mataram, we are not just reciting a poem out of patriotism. We are also reciting the historical underpinnings, the social underpinnings that are there when we talk about our mother country, about our motherland. Alright, so when we recite Vande Mataram, we are referring to the fact that our mother country, our Bharat Mata, is a beautiful country which has offered us with food, with all things that are needed to sustain us, and at the same time, we are at the service of the nation. So it is the service. So it is India first. It is Bharat first. It is our motherland, our country which comes first. And when we recite Vande Mataram, we are also referring to the rich flora, to the rich fauna, to the rich flora of our country basically, and how our country is very closely related to nature and natural descriptions. It's one of the strengths of our country. Now comes the next stanza, which is one of the most powerful stanzas in this poem. Thine the strength that nerves the arm, thine the beauty, thine the charm. Every image made divine in our temples is but thine. Thou art Durga, lady and queen, with her hands that strike and her swords of sheen. Thou art Lakshmi, lotus throned, and a muse a hundred toned. Right? So here, what is the poet Bankim trying to do here? He is representing Mother India as Durga. And what does Durga represent in our popular imagination today? In the Hindu Dharam, in the Sanatan Dharam, Durga basically represents the warrior goddess. Durga is a warrior goddess. She's the goddess of removing all the difficulties. Right? So the poet represents India as Durga. And the entire idea of a Bharat Mata is also enshrined and also coded in this particular philosophical and traditional Indian philosophical thought, that our country is a representative of Durga, the warrior goddess. Right? So here the poet, if you look at this stanza again, the poet refers to our country as Durga Mata, right? Representing her fierceness and the warrior spirit that is there within the soil, within the culture of India. He also talks about the Bharat Mata as a lady, as a queen, as a calm lady, as a queen, and at the same time as Durga Mata. So the nation is compared then with several other Hindu goddesses. As the stanza progresses, the nation, our country, is compared with several other Hindu goddesses, for example, Mata Lakshmi. So the nation is compared with Durga, the nation is compared with Lakshmi. So therefore, this concept of Bharat Mata, so the conclusion that we come to is that the concept of Bharat Mata is closely related to, and I would say it's a derivative of Sanatan Hinduism. Right? So that is why Bankim Chandra has said that our country India is the epitome, is rather the representative of it represents Ma Durga, it represents a queen, it represents Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, the goddess of prosperity, the goddess of happiness. Right? So therefore, the idea is that when we narrate, when we read the poem, when we read this poem, Vande Mataram, we are once again reciting the cultural ideas that are there beneath the construction of our country, that is Bharat. So the concept of Bharat Mata is a close derivative of Hinduism. The concept of Bharat Mata is very closely related to Hinduism and to Sanatan Dharam. So basically it's a derivative of Hinduism, as I would say. Now let us go on to the final stanza, and I will end the lecture after this. The final stanza goes like this. Pure and perfect, without peer, mother, lend thine ear. Rich with thy hurrying streams, bright with thy orchard gleams, dark of hue, O candid fair, in thy soul, with jewelled hair and thy glorious smile divine, loveliest of all earthly lands, showering wealth from well-stored hands. So representing India as a nation, the country, Bharat Mata, the motherland as a nation which is rich of resources. So it is our country which is giving us resources, showering wealth from well-stored hands. And I'm quoting it, showering wealth from well-stored hands. So once again, harping on the richness of our country, on the idea that it is the Bharat Mata which is providing us with all the necessary things to sustain our life, which is giving us food, which is giving us water, which is giving us nature, and therefore it is our responsibility as responsible citizens of our country to pay back to our mother and to serve our mother, and therefore to make this country a better place to live in. So I hope now that the readers would have realized why this poem is a part of our VAC. It is adding a value to our culture. Vande Mataram is a cultural point. It's a cultural high watermark which represents our nation as the epitome of law, as the epitome of love, as the epitome of the warrior spirit, as a giver, as a giver of fortunes, right? As a giver of wealth, right? And then at the same time, Bankim Chandra also refers to the motherland as a muse, as an inspirational muse. As an inspirational muse who inspires poets to write poetry. Right? So this is the idea of Bharat Mata. This is the idea of our country that is being explicated through Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's poem, Vande Mataram. I hope the readers got food for thought from this particular lecture. I hope to see you soon in several other lectures, because as we know, this is going to be an ongoing lecture series. I will be uploading a lot of lectures on several other topics related to the VAC culture and communication. Hope to see you soon in the next lecture. Goodbye for now.